আসসালামু আলাইকুম এবং শুভ সকাল।
জি, আপনি মিউট করেন সবাইকে।
জি,
প্লিজ স্টার্ট।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম এবং শুভ সকাল। নসরত বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের মাননীয় উপাচার্য, বোর্ড অফ ট্রাস্টি এবং এই পরিবারের সকল সদস্যের পক্ষ থেকে দেশ এবং দেশের বাইরে থেকে যারা এই ভার্চুয়াল কনফারেন্সে অংশগ্রহণ করেছেন এবং যারা ফেসবুক লাইভে দেখছেন, তাদের সকলকে আমি ডক্টর এম জসিম উদ্দিন, অ্যাসোসিয়েট প্রফেসর, ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ পলিটিক্যাল সায়েন্স অ্যান্ড সোশিওলজি অ্যান্ড কোঅর্ডিনেটর, সেন্টার ফর পিস স্টাডিজ, আন্তরিক শুভেচ্ছা ও অভিনন্দন জানাচ্ছি। নর্থ বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের সেন্টার ফর পিস স্টাডিজ সিপিএস শান্তি, নিরাপত্তা এবং উন্নয়ন, মানবাধিকার, শরণার্থী এবং অভিবাসীদের অধিকার এবং সুশাসন নিয়ে গবেষণা করে আসছে। জাতির যে কোনো ক্রান্তি লগ্নে সিপিএস বিভিন্ন উদ্যোগ নিয়ে থাকে। আজকের এই প্রয়াস তারই ধারাবাহিকতা। বর্তমানে আমরা একটা যুদ্ধ অবস্থার মধ্যে দিয়ে আছি, আপনারা সবাই জানেন। ইটস অ্যান আনপ্রেসিডেন্টেড সিচুয়েশন। কোভিড-19 আমাদেরকে এক ভয়ঙ্কর অনিশ্চয়তার মধ্যে ফেলে দিয়েছে। আমাদের জীবন এবং জীবিকার উপর কোভিড-19-এর একটি ব্যাপক নেতিবাচক এবং সুদূর প্রসারী প্রভাব রয়েছে। অনেক জীবন ইতিমধ্যে ঝরে গেছে, অনেকে বাঁচার জন্য লড়াই করছে এবং কোভিড আমাদেরকে অনেক নির্মমতা দেখিয়েছে, যেখানে অমানবিক অনেক ঘটনা আমাদের হৃদয়কে নাড়া দিয়েছে। মানুষ অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই আমরা দেখছি অমানুষ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। এই কঠিন অবস্থার মধ্যেও ফেক কোভিড সার্টিফিকেট বিক্রি করে অসহায় মানুষকে প্রতারণা করছে। একটু সবাইকে মিউট করার জন্য আমি অনুরোধ করছি। করোনা ভাইরাস আমাদের ব্যক্তি নিরাপত্তা, খাদ্য নিরাপত্তা, জীবিকার নিরাপত্তা, শিক্ষার নিরাপত্তা, সামাজিক নিরাপত্তার উপর ব্যাপকভাবে নেতিবাচক প্রভাব বিস্তার করেছে, যার কারণে আমরা মানব নিরাপত্তা বা হিউম্যান সিকিউরিটি আঙ্গিকে কোভিড-19-এর প্রভাব, পরিণতি এবং কার্যকরী পদক্ষেপ নিয়ে এই আলোচনার উদ্যোগ নিয়েছি। আপনারা সবাই জানেন, গত 18 জুন আমাদের প্রথম ভার্চুয়াল কনফারেন্স হয়েছে, যেখানে আমরা 5টি অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ থিমের উপর 5 জন ডিস্টিংগুইশ স্কলার কথা বলেছেন। At this stage, on behalf of the North University, I would like to welcome our foreign dignitaries, excellencies, speakers, UN and other development officials. I apologize to our foreign guests that the modality of the event will be in Bangla and English. It will be bilingual for outreaching the mass or maximum audience. However, all the presentations are made in English, so if you have any queries or comments, you are most welcome to send them in the chat box or Facebook comments option. And before I introduce our panel, I would like to just utter a few words on human security. Actually, I have already explained this in the concept of human security in the first conference. Because of the time limits, just a few words I would like to remind that human security is defined as free from fear and free from want and free from hunger. Bhoy theke mukti, abhav theke mukti, khuda theke mukti, and living in dignity. We, the best creature of Almighty, whatever our color, whatever our religion, whatever our belief, we deserve to live in dignity. So that is actually the key message of human security. And this concept actually addresses all the insecurities that jeopardize human life. And we see that COVID-19 actually affected all aspects of our life. So, and of course, the state and the government, they have their responsibility to ensure the human security and the safety of the people. So, at this point, let me introduce our panel. I'm really very glad that today we have a very quite heavy panel, distinguished scholars to share their views and enlighten the audience. So let me mention their name and profile briefly, one by one, and the sequence of the event. First, Professor Tawfiq, Director, South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance, SIPG, will provide the introductory speech. And then we have three distinguished speakers. We'll talk on three important topics today. Let me introduce, I would like the speakers to greet to the audience so that they can actually recognize you. Yes. Dr. Tawfiq.
Yeah, so welcome everyone.
Thank you. And then Dr. Ahsan H. Mansoor, the Executive Director, Policy Research Institute of Bangladesh, a very prominent economist in our country. He will, yes, he will present on poverty and inequality. Thank you, sir, for joining with us. And then we have Ambassador Shahidul Haq, the Senior Fellow of SIPG, North South University. And you all know, is the former Foreign Secretary and a very distinguished diplomat. And he will present on migration and remittance. Ambassador Shahidul Haq, I think he's there. And then we have Professor Helal Muhyiddin. He's the professor of Department of, thank you, Department of Political Science and Sociology, North South University. He's also a member of CPS. And he will talk on impact of COVID-19 on general generational divide. Okay. And then we have three discussants today. Dr. Nazneen Ahmed, Senior Research Fellow of Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies, BIDS. She's a very popular economist in Bangladesh. Dr. Nazneen, can you hear me?
Ken, thank you so much for introducing me.
Okay, my pleasure. And then we have Mr. Gigauri, Chief of Mission, IOM Bangladesh. Mr. Gigauri. Mr. Gigauri, can you hear me? Okay, I think he's there because he joined.
Good morning. Yes, apologies. Slight technical difficulties.
Okay, nice to see you. Nice to see you, Mr. Gigauri, and thanks for joining. And then we have Mr. Nazrul Islam, Director General, Multilateral Division, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh Government.
Good morning and assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Mr. Nazrul. And our Honorable Vice Chancellor, North South University, Professor Atiqul Islam, will provide the concluding remarks. Professor Atiqul Islam, sir.
Yeah, he's there.
Okay. Professor Atiqul Islam there. So thank you very much. Now I would like to request Dr. Ahsan Mansoor to present his paper on poverty and inequality.
Dr. Joshim, there was some introductory remarks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Professor Tawfiq will provide the introductory remarks. Yes.
It's fine. It's fine. When we are having this virtual conference, sometimes the sequencing and other things it gets a little bit diluted. So, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning, everyone. I'm Professor Tawfiq, the Director of South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance and Center for Peace Studies. I welcome you all to this second virtual conference on impacts, consequences, and responses to COVID-19 in Bangladesh, a human security approach. We are having an overwhelming number of participants, and I welcome all of them. We have probably with us British High Commissioner and also the other diplomats from different bilateral and multilateral agencies, government officials, NGOs, civil society leaders, and also there's our panelists. So I welcome all of you. I will not take much time and just give you a kind of a background that from where we started this, the whole initiative of COVID-19 conference that we did. In the first round, 5 thematic discussion we did on the issues like health and well-being, livelihood and business, education and skill development, agriculture and food security, and geopolitics of COVID-19. So that was the first round that we conducted last month. and now we are having this second round with the three thematic areas. So with this 5 thematic discussion, which were very, very productive in the last round also, we will be developing a series of policy briefs for the policymakers of Bangladesh and also our development partners, multilateral and bilateral. And we will be circulating it, and we're very hopeful that it would be a kind of a added benefit for many of the people who are working on this issue at the policy level as well as at the field level. So with that background of the whole conference, I just talk a little bit about CPS and SIPG. We are doing this kind of webinars after the COVID situation very frequently, and we are not doing it as just like an event. We always do any webinar or any kind of this workshops or seminars, and then we develop a kind of a policy briefs or policy documentation so that it can be followed up in the later stage. And that's why you will be finding that in this event also we have invited, and we are very happy that a good number of different sectorial people, they have joined from policymakers to the NGO level workers and decision makers. So I hope this one will also be very, very productive and helpful and lively. And with that note, I welcome again to all of you, and now handing it over to Dr. Joshi. Dr. Joshi.
Thank you very much, Professor Tawfiq, for your introductory speech and say a few words about Center for Peace Studies and its activities. Now, I would like to request
Dr. Joshi, I forgot to also introduce here that Ms. Mia Seppo, the resident coordinator of UN agencies, are also present here. So I welcome also Mia Seppo. Yeah, please carry on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I also welcome all the dignitaries and excellencies once again. And now I would like to request Dr. Ahsan S. Mansour to present his paper on poverty and inequality.
Thank you, Dr. Jashim, and thanks for inviting me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to make a very brief presentation on basically the developments that we have. I think you can see that presentation
we can
now.
See your slide.
Okay, my topic is poverty and inequality. And this is a story that I wish to tell from going back a little bit and see where we were, where we are before COVID, and then discuss what COVID might have done to us, because the impact is still not fully clear, and then some forward-looking thinking. So what I want to say basically is that poverty reduction in Bangladesh has been a mixed story. It's not we have made significant gains, as you can see in the chart. That let me minimize the screen. Yeah, as you can see in the chart, that there are 2 types of poverty that Bangladesh measures. One is the moderate poor, and the other is the extreme poor. In both categories, there has been significant reduction in the poverty level. So that's the positive side of it. And certainly, you can see that the data point stops at 2016, because these are based on household expenditure survey. And the surveys are done periodically, not every year. So we have intermittent surveys done. The latest one is 2016. And then there has been some extrapolation, which will come later. So from this point of view, if you go to the second chart, we see a little bit of mixed picture. What is that? We can see that in the first 10 years, the green lines, there has been significantly higher, there was significantly higher decline in poverty during the period 2000 to 2010, every year. But on the other hand, if you look at the period subsequent to that, 2010 to 2016, the rate of poverty decline has come down. So that's what I was characterizing as a mixed story, that we have been doing well, but we did better in the past, and the progress has slowed down somewhat in the most recent data point. So that's something that we take note of. Household sector, and the bottom 40%, only 29% of the bottom 40% is receiving some kind of government support. The rest are not. And that's primarily because of resource constraint. We all know that Bangladesh government has very limited allocation for social safety programs. It's about 2%, but out of that about 0.6, 0.7% is for government pension itself. So once we exclude that, the real allocation is not more than 1.5% of GDP. And that can only cover so many people. So the coverage of the safety net program is still an issue that needs to be addressed, and resource allocation is the main problem there. Then comes the issue of other point, that average reduction in poverty during this period. So we have divided this period 2000 to 2005, 2005 to 10 in the second panel, bottom one, 2010 to 16. We see that the average growth in GDP per capita has been increasing. It's mainly because population has been relatively low in growth, but at the same time, real GDP growth has been quite significant. So there has been a steady increase in per capita real GDP growth. Now, corresponding to that, if we look at average reduction in poverty, we see that between 2005 and 10, the poverty rate, the poverty reduction accelerated compared to the preceding 5 years. But after 2010, it has slowed down again. It's a reflection of the earlier development that I mentioned. So that happened in all categories, not only in the moderate poverty level, but also in the extreme poverty level. So the 2005 to 10 period, the poverty reduction per year has been better, despite somewhat lower growth rate than in the period 2010 to 16, despite somehow a higher per capita GDP growth rate. So that means there is a emerging what you call income distribution issue that may be impacting this performance. Then comes the gains in poverty reduction during the 7th plan was more than reversed due to the COVID-19. Now let's see here, what were the gains that were made? We can see that during the 7th 5-year plan, 16, 17, 18, 19, in both categories, extreme poor and moderate poor, there has been significant and steady gains in poverty reduction. Not exactly in line with the planned target, slightly behind by about 1 percentage point by 2019, but nevertheless, not bad performance. Now here comes the COVID, and the poverty effect has been quite devastating. Now, there are major challenges in estimating this poverty. And that's why what we did in the context of preparing the 8th 5-year plan of the government, we took a number of scenarios, low case scenarios to the worst case scenarios. And we simulated those exercises and tried to determine the impact of the percentage point impact and the number of millions of people who went below the poverty line. So the bottom chart is that one. This bottom table, this table basically shows that the worst case scenario, about 19.7% of population may have gone down below the moderate poverty level. This is the highest case scenario, of course. We only believe that this might have happened at the peak of the lockdown, like in April and first part of May. But then with people coming back to work in various sectors, not to the full extent, we are somewhere in that graduated scale, and probably around 14% to 9.1 to 14%. In that range, we are right now hovering around. So we are in the between scenario 3 and scenario 4 at the moment. So that's where we are. So that's a massive increase in poverty level. Something around, if you take the average of the scenario 3 and scenario 4, it will be about 20 million people. And in terms of percentage of population, it will be about 9 and 14 is about something like 12% of households, additional households. That's gone to the below the poverty line. So this is a major shock, unquestionably, and it requires also major interventions, which we may not have seen as yet. Now, there is a variation, wide variation in the incidence of poverty across different parts of Bangladesh. It is not uniformly that every region has gained equally, not really. Everybody has gained. The rise in tide has lifted all the boats, but some boats have been lifted much above the others. What are the areas which are most badly still suffering from highest level of poverty incidence? The division of Rangpur and Mymensingh. These are really still in bad shape. You can see that Rangpur and Mymensingh both has still at the moderate poverty level in 2000 data, it's 32.9%. It's the highest among all divisions in Bangladesh. And same with the extreme poverty, they're the highest among all divisions in Bangladesh. And there needs to be some concerted, directed action to alleviate those regions which are not doing as good. If you break it up further, we see that districts around Dhaka or Greater Dhaka subdivisions are quite well off. They've done better in poverty. But as we go along, we see that places like Kurigram, that's in Rangpur division, in Dinajpur, again Rangpur division, Bandarban in Chittagong division, and certain other areas has not done well at all. And their levels are many-fold bigger. Particularly disturbing is that Kurigram has 71% households below the poverty line. That's a staggering number. So there is a need for distributional issue, regional distribution, and the political economy plays a role in that regard. Government has to go above that and try to allocate resources in a way that it really reaches the poor segments of the society in those neglected areas of Bangladesh. Monga has done something better. They're not starving now, but they're still very poor in those parts, Gaibada, Rangpur, and so on. Kurigram, Dinajpur. Fiscal policy generally has two functions, but in Bangladesh, it has not been very effective, frankly speaking. It's because two reasons. One is that our tax policy, while on paper, it is quite progressive, quite highly progressive, one can say. But actual reality is that it's not being enforced. So the bottom line is that we have a progressive tax system, but because it's not enforced, rich are not paying taxes. And if that's the case, then there is no transfer from the very wealthy households and then using it for distribution to the poor households. So on the one hand, tax system is not working that great. It's basically not working for redistribution purpose, despite its progressivity. On the other hand, the expenditure side of it, the allocation is very minimal. And we also know that it's not reaching out to the real poor. We have studies done. It indicates that 40% of the resources are misdirected, not going to the intended households as they should. So there's a lot of misallocation that's going on in that area as well. Now, this is a very revealing chart. It's based on Household Expenditure Survey. It shows that growth has increased and most people has benefited from growth, unquestionably. But the bottom 10%, and particularly the bottom 5% has not got any benefit out of the growth. Indeed, their income has declined. And that's a very disturbing phenomenon. We need to understand that better. Who are they? Are they the physically challenged one? Are they mentally challenged one? Are they the really senior citizens? Are they suffering from illnesses? Why are not government catching them in the safety net program? So those are issues that needs to be addressed. But the income data shows that this is the bottom part that missed out from the rising tide completely. And something has to be done in that front. Same story is coming out. If you look at expenditure survey, expenditure is a little bit better because it captures the government interventions. It captures the remittances from urban to the rural areas and also foreign to the rural areas. So remittance picture and all that things has helped this expenditure one. People expending more, particularly when they're poor, then they're consuming more, then they're having income which can be officially recorded. So essentially we can see is that still the bottom 5%, here the decile bottom 10 is doing little better, but not as much. You can see the top 5%, they're doing so much better. So top 10% doing so much better. And this what is disturbing to us. We have to do something on this front. And income distribution is a major factor that has contributed to this consumption, disturbing nature of the consumption pattern, and then something has to be addressed in terms of equality of income, an issue that cannot be forgotten. Just my last concluding observation is that growth in general has helped significantly reduce poverty in Bangladesh in the last 2 decades. However, poverty situation has remained serious even before COVID-19. There are areas, particularly certain districts, which were stubbornly poor, and that areas needs targeted intervention. Although most households significantly benefited from the high growth in recent years, the very poor has been left out entirely. Despite growth, both income and consumption of the bottom 5% of the households have declined significantly in real terms, and that's very disturbing. COVID-19 made the poverty situation much worse, but we hope if the economy comes back in a year's time, I'm not optimistic like the government, but in a year's time, maybe next July, much of this may be reversible. Fiscal policy has not been effective at all and needs to be much more effective in terms of both tax policy by collecting taxes from the rich, as well as distributing the social safety net resources to the poor, real poor, as much as possible, as effectively as possible. Government has the what we call social safety net strategy. It is not being implemented in full force. If they could have done it, we could have reduced some of the poverty incidences by now. On the expenditure side, as we mentioned before, only less than 2% is really allocated for the poor and vulnerable segments of the society. 40% of that is misdirected or mistargeted. And Bangladesh is running more than 150 social safety net programs. There are lots of overlaps in those. The reform suggested under the government social security system strategy, this was funded by UNDP, and PRI drafted the document and the government accepted it as the government document now, but that still remains to be fully implemented. They have started, I would say, very small steps they have started. So special short-term measures will need to be addressed, need to be taken to address the current sharp increase in poverty. International experience may be relevant in this respect. We have been telling the government that, yes, we understand that the current poverty situation, the sharp increase is reversible. It will come back when the economy comes back to its normal pace. But we have to do something now to reach out to this very large, there's tens of millions of people who have been unemployed and their families, they need to be fed. Government has to do something more. And we suggested that they should follow example like Pakistan, provide money directly through bKash and other mechanisms to them on the basis of their self-identification. And we made a calculation that a modest 3,000 taka per family for 1.5 million family members, 5 million families, for 6 months will cost government about 24,000 crore, less than $3 billion. So a government could have afforded it, but they have not done much, except that they have taken one-time measure for 50 lakh people, 5 million people for one time for 2,400. And that also got stuck because of corruption at the field level. The list they got from the field level is full of misinformation, wrong people, and they have to stop payments. So I again urge that they need to follow self-identification mechanism. We have the technology, we have the means to do it, but we need to do it. I'll stop at that. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahsan Mansoor, for your very thought-provoking presentation. And I believe the stakeholders, including the government, will take directions from your deep analysis and policy recommendations. So we have many speakers today, so I'm not summarizing. Now I would like to request Ambassador Shoidul Haq to present on migration and remittance.
Thank you, Rishim, and thank you, everybody. My theme of today's presentation, which we didn't prepare sort of in coordination with Dr. Mansoor, but it looks that it will complement quite nicely. And I'll come back where it really directly complements. So theme is the fallout from the mounting COVID crisis on migrants and remittances, and how Bangladesh could possibly respond. So I'll try and focus on 4 areas, a kind of a quick overview on the migration dynamics. Often we feel that migration is just a movement from one place to another, especially the labor migration, which is not. So one slide on that, and I'll be very fast on that. And then look at the consequences on the migration process globally, not the migrants initially, migration process, how it has impacted globally. And then look at through some statistics as to how specifically it is likely to impact it or already has impacted on Bangladesh migrants. And then look at that what the civil society and academicians and the government of Bangladesh should together do to address it. So quick, before going into that, I'm showing this a very interesting risk analysis. It came out of the World Economic Forum last week. And surprisingly, the risk report, which is based on 347 analysts' analysis of grade 1, they have identified 31 risks out of the COVID on the global economy, and looking at actually end or beginning of 2022. See how they are projecting 18 months down the line. And surprisingly, the migration came out as a 5th global risk. And this is business people speaking, not civil society speaking, not migrant speaking, not human rights organizations speaking, it's the business speaking, just to show how devastating the COVID could likely to have on migration and on migrants. So that's a quick, and it's available in the web. Those who are interested can go and see. This is the one slide that I said that migration is not a simple movement. It is basically a complex outcome of 4 sets of issues. One is the new economic landscape. Global economy is in recession. I know the economists will differ. It may not be in the deep recession, but it is in the recession. So that has a number of impact, including the impact of globalization and connectivity, which is the lifeline of migration and mobility. Then comes the new development paradigm, though we said that no one should be left behind, and we have seen Dr. Mansoor's presentation. that there are people who are actually left behind, not only in Bangladesh, but globally. So that's the second set of issues which forces migration. And then the whole geopolitical tension. Power is shifting. And when power shifts, it creates a huge goodwill from the west to the east. And we see some of that getting manifested even in our neighborhood. So that's the third set of sectors. And the last one, but very important, is the environmental risk, especially for Bangladesh. I will not focus on today much on the climate change, but there's a direct relation between the COVID, climate change, and mobility, which is often undesired. So a new order is in the making, not only geopolitical order, but also the migration order and financial order and all kinds of order. So that's quick update on this. Let's see what are the key consequences of on the migration governance. I'm still not on the individual migrants. So there are 4 areas that I just highlight. Starting with the SDG report came out day before yesterday. And you know that migration is the window of SDG 10 for the global initiative, where it has identified what are the COVID impacts on various SDGs. And SDG 10 actually categorized the COVID impact on migration as highly disproportionate negative impacts. There are SDG targets and goals where it is less, minimal, not sure, but here they're very sure that there will be highly disproportionate negative impact on vulnerable groups, especially on migrants and refugees. So that's a fact, and done based on a recent study by the UN. And then you have the state actually, why it is so. What happened when the COVID came in, and like previous pandemics, states adopted migration tool to combat pandemic. And that created a huge lot of a crisis. It could not stop spread across the border, but it has stopped all kinds of mobility, including goods, services, and business we see often between even Bangladesh and India. Then, this also gave a tool to the politicians who are extremely ultra-rightist, populists, saying that, see, this is the migrants bringing in all kinds of disease for us. So let's stop that. And we see how it has eventually unfolded. And then the rights of migrants has absolutely been forgotten. It's not even in the discussion. And what has resulted in nearly stopping of migration. Almost, you have closed the tap. And this has been a great disruptor. I will go quickly because I want to focus on that. It is not only remittance, it is also FDI and ODA will drastically fall. So this is a picture recently of the World Economic Forum, where see how in 2020 it will drop. In fact, in 2020, remittance will drop for globally 20%, and for South Asian countries, there is a policy paper on that. It will be 22%, which is quite significant for Bangladesh. And as Dr. Mansoor has been mentioning about its positive impact at the grassroots level, would certainly see a consequence. Okay, so what is the problem? Problem is that we as a state and as community has never really addressed migration and mobility. We always thought it is refugee, it is human trafficking, it is labor migration separately, as if they don't interface. People do not move in that way. People move in a mixed flow, in a mixed migration. So that's continue to remain a challenge, and I just put it so that we don't have any illusion that we can deal with one and leaving the rest. Now coming back to the Bangladesh, UNDP did a very interesting study. RC Mia is here. In early 20, before the COVID, and they said, what is the mega trend for Bangladesh, which is likely to impact Bangladesh in the coming months and years? 3, urbanization, climate change, and migration. So I'm talking pre-COVID, all related to migration and mobility. So this is a global picture, and there are very good studies available in the UN. Now, what is our status? We always feel that we are a sending country, but narrative has to change. This is the first sort of a suggestion. Bangladesh is at the same time a transit country. People come from various neighboring countries and flies out or often get stranded. And then Bangladesh is also a destination country. Just to show the inbound flow, at any point of time, we have about 500 to 1.2 million people. And they also remit $3.25 billion annually. And this is a study done by the Transparency International beginning of this year. So this is the quick picture as to Bangladesh. So we have to deal with three dimensions of the mobility at the same time, not only thinking of sending migrants abroad or bringing them back. So there was a very interesting study done by one of the NGOs in Bangladesh, IID, of migrants who are abroad. And this, what that bothers you during this COVID period. Surprisingly, they did not feel that food or medicine is the issue. It's the question of lack of information. So that is one globally coming out, that when you are in Germany and you do not speak the language, how do you get information? So that is a global problem has emerged. And then the whole issue of lockdown concern and returning home and the rest of it. But there's a hashtag, if you look at, people start putting the hashtag saying that, je ne suis pas virus. I'm not a virus. But anytime you see, and you know what I mean, even that I see in Bangladesh, a particular ethnic population, we try and avoid thinking that they have brought the virus or they're likely to bring the virus. So that's a big issue in terms of discrimination. And I'm sure that Professor Hilal will bring some bit of it. Now, major fallout, I'll go through quickly. There are two major fallouts I'll try and deal in some statistics. One is the migration and remittance. The other one is this being stranded and returned. Migration flow, as I have already said, that it has come to a halt. Just to give you one recent study done by the BRAC, it said currently at this moment, there are 2 lakhs Bangladeshis waiting, I put it in the quote, to depart. All formality is done. They're about to fly out. They cannot fly out. So 200,000, large number. Then you have a slowdown of remittances. I will not go into that anymore, just to give you some bit of it. Now, often we think that remittance has become, has got into a problem. It's not. The decline of remittance or remittance issues because of the migration crisis. So we have to go into the roots of the remittance issue, not symptoms. Now, stranded, that is becoming a big issue for government, for people, for civil society. So what is happening is there are some people who wants to come back, but they cannot come back. They are trapped. So these are about 300,000 Bangladeshis currently stranded abroad without a job, without proper support, and they want to come back, they cannot come back. So that's one. Second is the whole issue of return. Return has been happening. And I have not verified this particular statistics, but it is a BRAC study between mid-February and mid-March, 500,000 Bangladeshis returned. I said that I haven't verified this, but the figure would be around that, because that is one of the biggest problem. And I know Chief of Mission IOM is here, and they have put together a strategy paper in terms of return and reintegration, which he will share. And in the midst of all, the human trafficking has really jumped up. Just see today's newspaper or CNN, where Bangladeshis are getting stranded all over the places. That's quite alarming, and it is a direct impact of COVID. Good. So I've come into the migration governance area. In this, I will focus on 4 areas, or a little more than that. Migration will fundamentally alter like other systems. So that's something the government has to recognize and then put their act together. One is that it is again at a crossroad, but it shall never stop. There are countries, there are policymakers, he or she thinks that it is an ad hoc movement, and tomorrow or day after tomorrow it will fizzle out and people will not move. No, even if you cross the developed stage, people will continue to move in different form and formats. So that's the reality that policymakers have to take into consideration. Second, the rights. It is becoming a global problem. Secretary General has raised quite a bit of a flag on this. Among the vulnerable people, migrants globally are at risk. Even internal migrants are getting a very raw deal in terms of treatment from own government. So the issue of sustainable reintegration is extremely critical. I know that Chief of Mission IOM will possibly focus on that. I will not, I'll try and close it. We have been hearing today that there's peoples who are not allowed to land Bangladeshis in various countries. Rightly so, because meanwhile, the travel industry has introduced 37 different kinds of procedure for migrants to be able to, or people able to move. And if we do not catch up with that, we will have this crisis continue. And some of our local papers were saying this. But what is that the governments and the people and the civil society needs to work on? We have a compact. We have a compact which is adopted by 152 countries. I put the Prime Minister, because Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has really, in the UNGA in 2016, has raised the whole issue of compact, which is currently adopted. So we have a compact based on which we can we can work on that. And this is my last slide. Can I go back to the previous slide? Yeah. In addition to the UN, we have to also look as a state, as an NGOs, what are the other initiatives currently in place or in the making? The one area where we see a lot of work is the World Economic Forum. They have actually designing a great reset. And within the great reset, in economy, migration will feature out. So that's an organization with which we should be closely working with. In fact, our Honorable Prime Minister, as a keynote speaker, were asked to speak among the in the leaders in April. I think it is 23rd April, where she has proposed a 5-point, and one of the points actually focused on saving, protecting migrants, and that's the reason I put it here. Now, this is the last slide. 4 things we possibly would think of. One is that pandemic is not a migration problem. Often we look at a pandemic as a migration problem, unfortunately. But migrants are part of the solution. You look at statistics, I'll not go into that. Second, we need a global dialogue. There is a dialogue going on the health sector, on economic sector, but on the migration sector, because migration is under threat, under crisis. And migration can create a much more havoc globally than anything else, because when people move in an unregulated and disorderly manner, it can really bring down real danger for all of us. And we know in 2015 and 16 what happened in Europe. So the third is that time has come to think of a migration order based on the compact, but with greater participation of other countries. And Bangladesh, the way our Prime Minister had assumed a global responsibility in 2015-16 in terms of promoting a global compact, I think Bangladesh should again reassume the leadership. Whatever we do, we should keep migrant at the center. It is not a process. It is not a money-making machine. It is individuals' well-being and rights. Thank you very much. And sorry for taking a little longer time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shahidul Haq, for your very, very exciting presentation. Remittance is one of the lifelines of our economy. Millions of Bangladeshi people depends on remittance, we all know, and Ambassador Shahidul Haq very articulated, share his thoughts to respond the crisis, to mitigate the problem. Now, I would like to request Professor Helal Mohiuddin to present his paper. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My presentation would be somewhat different from the other two presentations in different capacities. The first is that we already heard two papers on macro situations. But now I am bringing you all to micro situations, what is happening at the family level in our country and elsewhere in the world. So my topic is corona-driven mental health and adolescent mental health and well-being in Bangladesh, a socio-anthropological appraisal. As you see from my topic that it would be much more a discussion on some empirical findings. And I will get to the main points immediately without taking much time. So first I need to discuss with you some of the recent events that are taking place in our family level, and all these are outcome of corona, especially at the family level and our social relationship level. One example, just I am giving you from the newspapers that was published 2 or 3 days ago, that a father got, because he could not meet the demand of his son, who was asking for a tab for his school purpose, that he needs it, agency, but he could not manage it because he did not have that capacity. So it is one simple isolated incident. Let's get back to some of the accounts that we got from some of our respondents. One is dissociation. I got this information from about 4 or 5 different, I think about 5 different respondents, that they're very worried about their kids, especially adolescents' behavior. They can't understand them anymore. One of the reasons is that they waste long time in the washroom. Once they get in, they don't come out, and other family members suffer. Because some of them don't have the financial ability to afford big apartment with 2 or 3 washrooms. So 1 or 2 washrooms that they share in the family with some extended level family members, it becomes a very big problem. Just it is one of the account. I just extracted a few to share with you. Another person is very, very concerned about his son's tendency to use medicine, different types of medicines, paracetamol and other types of medicines, just indiscriminately whenever he's getting it. His special fascination is for the vitamin tablets and other things. So it has become a big concern for him. Then I started to look at other information that we got through our rapid assessment kits. And there we found that, okay, some other parents also reported that they are concerned about their children's behavior there. Another one is ill-opinionated behavior. This is something like, okay, they don't expect, parents and guardians don't expect that children will sneak into everything, all sorts of discussions, especially adults discussion, but they're coming in and they are talking very loud on some sensitive issues, something like homosexuality, something like other things. So probably in the Western context, it is okay. But now this is the perception of their father, mother, parents, and other guardians that no, this is going to be too much. And we can't take it any more, not only on that, other issues as well, even national politics too. So they are uninvited and unwelcomed intruders in their discussion, especially adult sort of discussions. And then they are ill exposures to some other antisocial elements. It depends. There are different things. Parents did not clearly disclose to us what that is, but one is pornography for sure, and they are very concerned about that okay, their kids are being very much exposed to pornographic materials, and they don't really know how they are getting access to all these materials. It's on their devices, and it is creating a different types of mindset in their children. Now, the generational divide, the question of generational divide actually came from one of the MIT publication long time ago, Susan Herring, she used the term to assume that something will happen in the time about 12 years ago. And she was thinking that, okay, there would be some sort of moral panic among the parents and guardians, especially on the net speaks and the way kids and adolescents behave on their online platforms. As you know, text is and chat messages, chat rooms. There they use different types of coded languages that only adolescents understand. Sometimes we don't understand. By now we understand like LOL, WTF, and other sorts of cuss words, and different types of things. Other than that, they use different types of acronyms and sometimes, made up words like FRND, friends, that will create some kind of tensions. It was hard that often we perceive that kids, especially adolescents, are vulnerable. They can become prey to the predators, online predators, those who have some ill motives and other things. So it was just the basic thing, but now the situation has changed. All the devices now do the correction sort of things, so it can correct the misspelling and other things. It is taking care of, technology is taking care of that. So children's behavior is having different shift, and it is moving to other directions with which the parents and guardians are not really comfortable with yet. Probably it will take some time. So the findings in a nutshell in our study, it is still at the elementary stage. Probably we will have to go for another 2-3 different stages. At this stage, what we understand that mental health crisis is more evident in urban, educated, middle income family settings. The poor are not that prone to these sort of problems. Number two, for adolescents of the lower middle income and low income families, it's more a strife than crisis. They don't consider it crisis, but a kind of struggle and sudden struggle. Here, that we got parental perception more, 86%, although we sent a full number of questionnaire, our rapid assessment kits, to for parents and for parent guardians sharing the question with children were 72% of them, and the other 28% and guardians did not even expect that their kids, their family members, especially the young ones, their stream, then introversion, social detachment, modern
I'm sorry to interrupt, Professor
media that
we cannot
they
hear you
are
properly.
exposed to.
Professor
And
Helal Muhyiddin, can you hear
online
me?
media as
Professor Helal Muhyiddin. Professor Helal, can you hear me? I think he has some net problem. So, just I would like to wait just for a while whether he can come back.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah, now
Hello.
we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear
Now
you.
you can hear me. I am sorry, I believe I got
I think you
disconnected for a
don't,
while.
if you have net problem, you don't need to, open your video if it is
Okay.
convenient for you. We
Yeah,
want,
I think probably that would do better.
yeah. And
Do
kindly
you
summarize
see
because,
the screen that I am showing? Do you see my
no, actually we can't see
PowerPoint?
your PowerPoint.
You can't see my PowerPoint? Let me share with you. Do you see my PowerPoint? Not yet? Do you see now?
No, you cannot see PowerPoint without the video screen.
Without the video screen, okay. Probably I disconnected the
Okay, then you
video.
can on it and
That
then
is why.
try. And if it doesn't work, then I think you can summarize your findings.
Okay.
Summarize your findings.
Okay. So 80 to, like this is nervous breakdown, and 80 to 90% are all these things. Then inertia, lack of motivation, low confidence, all these problems are there. But now we are getting to the main discussion. So all these things you can quickly see that okay, proneness to obesity is one of the biggest problems that is coming out very strongly. That okay, they are concerned about that. And then the bad association online. This is another one. We also got a deterioration in reading and writing skills, self-harming tendency. This is another one problem that we need to pay attention to probably in the coming days. Then substance abuse also came to some extent that, okay, they have a tendency like that. So there are different types of studies already done, but different mental health and reproductive health based research, but emergency sort of things are very much absent there. Like in Bangladesh, we have two strategies, one policy and one strategy. One is 2017 to 2030 national strategy for adolescent reproductive health for the country. There is no indication how that would be maintained in emergency situation. Probably we have never thought about that. And there are some of the points that are made there, like okay, universality and inalienability, indivisibility, all these things. These are guiding principles in our strategy. But to what extent they are, pragmatic or practicable, because they are very common ones that we have been hearing over the couple of years. Now, even World Health Organization is pointing to exacerbating the learning crisis and pushing more households into poverty that will also affect their mental health, these sort of things. Now, the most important discussion here is that the finding that we need to focus on is visibility and invisibility sort of things. Let me give one example. Like we, the adults, are everyday being engaged into different tasks. Still, we are available online and active online. We are having different webinars. And we don't have any plan or planning to see the children. That is why they are going behind the curtain more and more all the time. And we have made that situation that, okay, so they are hiding themselves too much. Probably we needed much more to make them visible. And this is very much absent. Children, they are feeling, they are expressing their opinion to their parents as well. Those, especially in the discussions that were made by both, that, okay, they are feeling left out, very passive, like we are othering them. They're like others. We are considering them as if they are others, not the family members, or they're sometimes feeling excluded. And at the policy level, at the macro level as well, there are two divisions actually. If we clearly see that one is political economy and another one is safety net approach. Political economy is most in the country. We are very much growth oriented. We are focusing in our national plans and budgetary things, everything about the macro level development and growth. But we are focusing on safety net only for the poor people and other people. It's a very much charity biased. Other one is incentive biased, as we have seen The government owners have got incentives this time, or the government workers. Similarly, safety net, we consider it something like, okay, it's a kind of charity of the government or the state to the common people. These mindsets should be changed. And the final slide, probably this is the most important one. There is now a movement, a kind of movement going on all over the world that, okay, be apart together. We will maintain physical distance and social distance. We will stay apart from one another, but in a way so that we can still form the society and community and feel like we are together. We are not separated. We need some kind of model that needs to be very much interactive because it is missing these days, especially parental and guardian and adolescent sort of interaction. It is very much missing. We need a kind of bridging model that will bridge that gap. And then another thing, probably we need to seriously consider about introducing emergency behavior change communication. It is very much absent in Bangladesh. We have social behavior change communication applied by different NGOs at the grassroots level, and they are very successful, like the water and sanitation, WattSan, it is one of the great examples that is very much successful, and in other contexts as well. But we need to devise something for the emergency periods, especially when the global communities and global universities at the same time who are also, I mean, World Health Organization and other organizations are also predicting that we will be facing more problems and more pandemic situations in the future as well. So this is pretty much my discussion. Thank you very much for listening and giving me a good hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Helal, for your very interesting presentation. This is something new. We need to look into these whole issues. আমাদের young generation, যারা আমাদের ভবিষ্যৎ, তাদের সাথে যে সিনিয়র এবং ইয়াং জেনারেশনদের যে চিন্তা ভাবনার যে দূরত্ব, বিশেষ করে কোভিডের ইম্প্যাক্টের ফলে যেটা আরো বেড়ে যাচ্ছে, সেই বিষয়টাকে উনি তুলে ধরার চেষ্টা করেছেন। One thing I would like to mention that CPS initiated this study, this empirical study. Professor Helal collected 100 samples he mentioned, and this study will continue. At this stage, I would like to request Dr. Nazneen, Senior Research Fellow, BITS, to discuss on poverty and inequality. You have 7 to 8 minutes, Dr. Nazneen.
Thank you very much. I'll skip introduction and everything, so to save the time. Thanks to the organizer for inviting me, and I think the paper presented by Dr. Hassan H. Mansoor was really, I mean, it is so comprehensive, but really gave us the true picture of our growth and how it actually impacted on the poor people, on inequality. So I will not go through what he mentioned, but definitely I'll just highlight some of the points that he made and on which I'm going to say a few words. Dr. Hassan Mansoor যে কথাগুলো বলেছেন, সেখানে we need to see some of the key punchlines. One হচ্ছে যে আমাদের poverty reductionের গতিটা কমছে since 2010. তারপর আমরা দেখছি যে পার ক্যাপিটা ইনকাম গ্রোথের সাথে যদি কম্পেয়ার করি, তাহলে আবার 2005 থেকে 10 পর্যন্ত যে আমাদের পারফরম্যান্স ইন টার্মস অফ রিডিউসিং ইনইকুয়ালিটি, সেটা আবার 10 এর পরে এসে কমছে। আমরা দেখছি যে এই যে সিচুয়েশনটা, যে আমাদের যে এত গ্রোথ হচ্ছে, সেইখানে দ্য bottom 5% they actually could not gain, rather their income went down. তার মানে হচ্ছে যে আমাদের যে ইনইকুয়ালিটি বাড়ার ক্ষেত্রে আমরা যে এটা ভাববো যে না, যে ঠিক আছে সবারই বাড়ছে, হয়তো বটমদেরটা কম বাড়ছে আর ধনীদেরটা বেশি বাড়ছে, ইটস নট ইভেন দ্যাট। মানে খুবই আনফরচুনেট যে we observed the bottom 5% actually experienced decline in income and also in expenditure, though the expenditure situation was a little bit better than the income situation. এর মধ্যে যোগ হয়েছে কোভিড, and so there was already there was this inequality and decline in the income and all those situation, and then the COVID actually, of course, that we can see that the impact is more on the poor people because they are more vulnerable. এবং আমাদের BIDS এর একটা গবেষণায় ডক্টর বিনায়ক সেন দেখিয়েছেন যে ইভেন আমরা যে পভার্টি লাইনকে অতিক্রম করেছে যারা, they're bunched around the poverty line, মানে poverty লাইনের একটু উপরে. So when you see the statistics, you see that our poverty rate has declined. কিন্তু poverty rate decline করলে আমি poverty লাইনের উপরে উঠে খুব বেশি দিন কিন্তু যাইনি. So that's why যেটা ডক্টর আহসান মনসুর রাইটলি দেখিয়েছেন যে বেশ কটা সিনারিওতে, সো দেয়ার ইজ বিগ পসিবিলিটি, অলরেডি আমরা সেটা দেখছি যে অনেক মানুষই যারা ওই পভার্টি লাইনের আশেপাশে ছিল, দে অ্যাকচুয়ালি কেম ডাউন টু দ্য পভার্টি লাইন আফটার দিস কোভিড ইম্প্যাক্ট. সো এই কোভিডের জন্য যেটা হচ্ছে যে দে আর মোস্টলি লুজিং দেয়ার লাইভলিহুড, এবং এই এমপ্লয়মেন্টটা চলে যাচ্ছে বলেই ইনকাম কমে যাচ্ছে, অ্যান্ড দেন তাদের এই এখনকার যে নতুন করে পুয়ার হওয়া। এবং এটার একটা কারণ হচ্ছে, এবার আমি যাই মন্তব্যে, একটা কারণ হচ্ছে প্রচুর অনানুষ্ঠানিক খাতে আমাদের এমপ্লয়মেন্ট গুলা, হিউজ ইনফর্মাল এমপ্লয়মেন্ট, দ্যাট অ্যাকচুয়ালি কজ দিস পিপল টু গো ডাউন দ্য পভার্টি লাইন very quickly because they don't really have good savings, they don't really have an employment that can give them long-term return. তাদের এমপ্লয়মেন্টটা দিন আনে দিন খাচ্ছি, so they just immediately when the economy was hit by COVID, they just could not cope with it and became poor. এই জায়গায় তবে একটা জিনিস ডক্টর আহসান মনসুরের স্লাইডে খুব ইন্টারেস্টিং শেষের দিকে এসে, যেখানে উনি দেখাচ্ছেন যে গ্রাম শহর এবং সব জায়গায় যে ইনইকুয়ালিটির পভার্টি কমার বিষয়টা, সেখানে দেখবেন যে গ্রামের মাথাপিছু আয় বৃদ্ধির হার কিন্তু গত অনেক বছরে শহরের মাথাপিছু আয় বৃদ্ধির হার থেকে বেশি। দ্যাট ইজ ইন্টারেস্টিং, যে তাহলে আমাদের কিন্তু আরবান পভার্টি, ইফ উই ওনার যে শেষ স্লাইডটা ছিল যেখানে উনি দেখাচ্ছে যে হাউস হোল্ডের শেষ স্লাইডের আগে যেখানে উনি দেখাচ্ছিলেন যে গ্রাম এবং শহরে কিভাবে ইনকাম, এই যেটার মধ্যে আমরা ইনইকুয়ালিটিটা দেখছি, যে গরিব মানুষ বলি bottom 5% or the top 5%, we see that the income of people, the rate of increase in the income of people is higher in the rural area, which is kind of interesting. তার মানে আমাদের urban poverty ও কিন্তু যদি আরো ডিপ অ্যানালিসিসে যাওয়া যায়, we will see that urban poverty কিন্তু অবস্থাটা আমাদের মানে জিনিসটা মোর কমপ্লেক্স টু হ্যান্ডেল। এখন কি করণীয়, সেইখানে আমরা ওই জায়গাটাতে যদি যাই, যে একটা তো যে ইনইকুয়ালিটি সিচুয়েশনটা দ্যাট ইভেন স্টার্টেড বিফোর কোভিড, এটা আমরা দেখলাম ইন স্ট্যাটিস্টিক্স, তাহলে এই যে আমাদের বেড়ে যাচ্ছে ইনইকুয়ালিটি, সেইটা আমরা রিডিউস করব কি করে? উপায়টা হচ্ছে যে যদি দ্য পুয়ার পিপল, ইফ দেয়ার দ্য গ্রোথ ইন ইনকাম, সেই রেটটা যদি তাদের যেটা সেটা যদি অ্যাভারেজ গ্রোথ রেট যেটা হচ্ছে ইনকামের ইনক্রিজ তার থেকে বেশি হয়, তাহলেই হচ্ছে এই গ্যাপটা কমে আসবে। অর্থাৎ দৌড়াতে হবে ওদেরকে বেশি দেন অন্যরা দৌড়াচ্ছে। whereas আমরা দেখছি যে ইভেন ওয়েলথেক্স বলে একটা অর্গানাইজেশন, they have mentioned that গত 10 বছরে the rate of growth in the number of rich people in Bangladesh, সেই দিক থেকে বাংলাদেশ পৃথিবীতে থার্ড। So there is nothing wrong if the number of rich people rises, but যেটা ডক্টর আহসান মনসুর দেখিয়েছেন যে if you don't have a good fiscal policy, fiscal system, যেখান থেকে ধনীর আয়টা থেকে গরিবের অংশ যায়, then you actually don't see the benefit which is trickle down to the poor. সেই জায়গায় অবশ্যই আমাদেরকে তাহলে যে অবস্থাটা আছে, COVID-19 তো এটাকে আরো বেশি সিচুয়েশনটাকে ড্যামেজ করলো এবং একটা লম্বা সময়ের পভার্টির আরেকটা রিস্কে আবার আমরা চলে গেলাম। সেই জায়গা থেকে one thing is we need আমাদের যেখানে ফিসক্যাল পলিসিতে আমাদের এমন ভাবে অ্যালোকেশন গুলো যেতে হবে, আমার মতে এটা হচ্ছে এডুকেশন, হেলথ অ্যান্ড স্কিল ডেভেলপমেন্ট, এর মাধ্যমেই আসলে লং টার্মে ইনইকুয়ালিটি কমানো যেতে পারে। সো এডুকেশনে আমরা কোয়ালিটি এডুকেশন দিচ্ছি কিনা ফর অল, আমাদের শুধু মুষ্টিমেয় কিছু আমাদের বাচ্চারা বা যারা একটু প্রিভিলেজড আছে তারা ভালো এডুকেশন পাচ্ছে, বাট উই নিড টু এনশিওর কোয়ালিটি এডুকেশন ফর অল। আমরা যদি গত শতকের মধ্যবিত্তের যে উত্থান সেটা দেখি, তাদের উত্থানের মূল শক্তি কিন্তু ছিল এডুকেশন। এডুকেশন হেল্প দেম টু গ্রো all the middle class people or even the poor people to become rich. আমরা কিন্তু দেখেছি যে সেটা মূলত the vehicle was education. আমাদের এখন এডুকেশনের কোয়ালিটিটা ডিভাইড হয়ে গেছে। আগে সবাই পাবলিক এডুকেশনে একটা মানসম্মত এডুকেশন পেত, সো উই নিড এডুকেশন ফর অল, এবং তার সাথে স্কিল ডেভেলপমেন্ট লাগবে। উই ডোন্ট নিড সো মেনি মাস্টার্স ডিগ্রি অ্যান্ড গ্রাজুয়েটস অ্যান্ড আদার্স। কারো যদি সেটার ক্ষমতা না থাকে কিংবা সেটাতে খুব ভালো না হয়, দেন অ্যাকচুয়ালি উই নিড স্কিলড পিপল। সো স্কিল ডেভেলপমেন্ট ট্রেনিং গুলো আপ টু ডেট এবং মডার্ন হওয়া দরকার, যাতে poor people they can also get access to those training programs and become skilled. এবং তাতে আমরা যে পরের প্রেজেন্টেশনটা যেটা শুনলাম, অ্যাম্বাসেডর শাহিদ যেখানে বলছিলেন যে এই যেখানে মাইগ্রেশন হচ্ছে সেইখানেও কিন্তু আমরা জানি যে বিকজ উই ডোন্ট হ্যাভ স্কিলড মাইগ্রেশন, সেটার জন্য আমাদের কিন্তু রেমিটেন্স আর কম হয় তুলনামূলকভাবে। আমি শেষ করে দিব। সো অ্যাট দিস মোমেন্ট একটা হচ্ছে ইমিডিয়েটলি যেটা করতে হবে টু ফর দ্য সার্ভাইভাল অফ দ্য পুয়ার, যেখানে তাদেরকে খাবারের সহায়তা, ইনকামের সহায়তা এবং অবশ্যই এটার সাথে হেলথের সহায়তা। এবং সেখানে যে কোভিড টেস্টের জন্য 200 টাকা করে একটা ফিস ধরা হয়েছে, আই থিঙ্ক এটা গরিব মানুষের জন্য 200 টাকা ইজ আ লট অফ মানি, এবং এটাকে এই ধরো একটা ফ্রি টেস্টের সুবিধা অবশ্যই থাকা উচিত। ইমিডিয়েটলি বাঁচানোর জন্য তাদেরকে খাদ্য এবং কর্মসংস্থান ঠিক রাখা, সবাইকে খালি হেল্প করে পারবে না গভর্নমেন্ট, সো মোস্টলি টু কিপ দেয়ার লাইভলিহুড অ্যালাইভ, সেই জন্য যে সকল জায়গায় কর্মসংস্থানের সুযোগ তৈরি হয়েছে, খালি কৃষিকে চাপ দিলে হবে না, সেইটার সেই সুযোগগুলোকে কন্টিনিউ রাখতে হবে। গভর্নমেন্টের বিভিন্ন প্রোগ্রামস, বিভিন্ন বড় বড় প্রকল্পের বাস্তবায়ন, এখন তো মেম্বার অফ পার্লামেন্টদেরকে বলা হচ্ছে 20 কোটি টাকা করে তার এলাকায় ওনারা খরচ করতে পারবেন ফর ডেভেলপমেন্ট প্রজেক্ট। তো সেইগুলো যদি, সেটা নিয়ে আমি আর অন্য কোনো কমেন্টে যেতে চাই না, আমি বলছি সেটা যদি দেয়াই হয় তাহলে সেটা যেন এমপ্লয়মেন্ট জেনারেটিং অ্যাক্টিভিটিসে ব্যবহার হয় তাদের এলাকায়। দ্যাট উইল জেনারেট এমপ্লয়মেন্ট ফর মেনি পিপল হু আর ফেসিং ক্রাইসিস। এটা হচ্ছে শর্ট রানে তাদের টিকিয়ে রাখতে হবে, আর লং রানে আসলে বা মিডিয়াম টু লং রানে আমাদের অবশ্যই ইনইকুয়ালিটি কমানোর অস্ত্র হচ্ছে এডুকেশন অ্যান্ড হেলথ অ্যান্ড স্কিল। এই তিনটা যদি আমরা কোয়ালিটি সম্পন্ন দিতে পারি, and if we can ensure access to good quality education, skill and health service to the poor, তাহলে কিন্তু আমাদের এই যে ইনইকুয়ালিটিটা আছে এইটাকে আমরা ধরতে পারবো। লাস্ট কথা হচ্ছে প্রথম দিকে পভার্টি খুব দ্রুত কমছিল এই কারণে যে লো হ্যাঙ্গিং ফ্রুট, আমরা রাস্তায় অনেক গরিব লোক দেখতে পেতাম, যে কোনো জায়গায় একটা প্রোগ্রাম শুরু করলে দ্য টার্গেটিং ওয়াজ ইজি। এখন দিনকে দিন যখন কমছে তখন পভার্টি রিডাকশনের জায়গাগুলো খুব রিমোট অঞ্চল, চর অঞ্চল, হাওড় অঞ্চল, বিভিন্ন জায়গায় যে আমরা দেখছি যে উত্তরবঙ্গের বিভিন্ন পকেটগুলোতে যে পভার্টি আছে, সো ইট হ্যাজ বিকাম মোর ডিফিকাল্ট টু অ্যাড্রেস পভার্টি। এই কারণেও কিন্তু রেটটা কমছে, বাট উই নিড টু হ্যাভ, প্রথম দিকে যেমন একটা প্রোগ্রাম খুলে দিলাম আর তাড়াতাড়ি পভার্টি রিডাকশন হলো, এখন সেটা হবে না। সো উই হ্যাভ টু অলসো লুক ইনটু দ্যাট। থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ফর
Thank you so much for your excellent analysis. We just love to listen. আরো শুনতে পারলে আরো ভালো লাগতো, সময় স্বল্পতা আছে। Now I have the pleasure to request Mr. Gigauri from International Organization of Migration, IOM, Chief Mission Bangladesh. Mr. Gigauri.
Thank you very much indeed.
You will discuss on migration and remittance.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me and for the initiative and bringing this series of very topical subjects to the fore at this important time. Also, thank you, of course, to Dr. Ahsan Mansour, Ambassador Haq, and Professor Mahuddin for their interesting presentations. On the issue of migration remittances, again, Ambassador Haq, who is very familiar with the subject, has covered most bases. I will only seek to complement specifically on the intersection between remittances, asset building, and gender, based on some recent findings coming out from our own IOM research. So, of course, as we know, GCC is the primary destination for Bangladeshi migrants, and about 73% of Bangladeshi remittances senders in 2018 lived in the GCC region. And insofar as international migration continues to be an income earning strategy for so many households in Bangladesh, in the context of the current pandemic, it is clear that all attention is on the subject, how to deal with it, and how to formulate the socioeconomic recovery based on the mobility challenges that we have encouraged, that we have confronted. And not, again, while the majority of the population we're dealing with and talking about in this context are labor migrants, it's important to remember that this crisis has affected other categories of migrants as well, rather than just exclusively labor migrants. So based on the findings that we have, and complementing what Ambassador Haq has already said, we know that strategies linking job skills and asset building to remittances can and do contribute to conditions that increase household financial stability and investment in education and health. Insofar as this link exists, it's not just a correlation, it is a causal link, we can expect the adverse effect as remittances go down and these households are not able to complement their income with the investments that they were expected to make. Most of the remittance receiving households have a female household head. 2019, 65% is the figure that we have discovered. About 90% of household heads are remittance recipients, and at least 95% of female household heads are housewives or unemployed. This, of course, speaks to the vulnerability of the pre-COVID situation, because our research looks at the pre-COVID reality, and we can expect the exacerbation of the most vulnerable as the crisis hits. And if there's one thing that we know, that during the recession, who suffers the most, it is the most vulnerable, the most destitute, and the most poor. Female remittance recipients are more financially vulnerable than male remittance recipients, with migrants' mothers being the most vulnerable, followed by migrants' wives. And this is to do with economic and social factors as well. Most of household heads have only one or two financial product ownerships in Bangladesh, and as migrants' skill level increases, so does the remitted amount, also determines by the recipient whether the recipient is the migrant spouse, mother, or father. Again, we already know, and it's intuitively correct to assume that the higher the skill level of the migrant, of the labor migrant, the more they earn, the more they send back, and the more they save. So this reality will be a triple hit, if you like, when redundant labor migrants are returned back to Bangladesh prematurely, as it will have a hit not only on their income levels, but also on their savings, consumption, and expenditure. Economic return on migration is lower in Bangladesh than countries with a skilled migrant workforce. Households led by migrant wives and mothers have a higher income dependence on remittances than those led by their fathers. Again, the gender dimension comes into play. Household dependence is even larger for female-led households that receive remittances from skilled migrants. And we know that skilled migrants ask that income be placed into savings, whereas the unskilled migrants put emphasis on paying off loans. It is no secret, and those that are familiar with the subject understand the problem of debt, the issue of dalals, and debt mediation. And imagine what happens when you have hundreds of thousands of migrants, predominantly unskilled migrants, returning that simply not only have lost their income and inability to save, but also returning in debt, which is an additional economic shock to the household, which inevitably translates to the community level. Financial independence among remittance receiving households increases as the amount of remittances received increases, and if the household sets aside income, including remittance income, for savings. We also know that skills matter for shaping financial dependence by sending high remittance amounts for a longer period. And of course, migrant skills mark a difference on how remittances are invested and saved. The upskilling, the investment in skills is something that we are very familiar in Bangladesh. As the UN Migration Network, we have developed socioeconomic recovery plan that is still to be approved by the government. It's been submitted to the special joint working group that has been set up for the return and socioeconomic recovery of the migrant population. And of course, this has been emphasized by everyone, starting from the Secretary General to the Prime Minister, and the importance of skills as a way, not only as a way out of the recession, but also in preparedness for future economic shocks. Ambassador Hack also mentioned the Global Compact for Migration. As we know, both remittances, skills, and the resilience of migrant workers and facilitation of regular migration is something that states have committed to through the compact on the international level. And if we are to find an effective way out of this looming crisis and implement the socioeconomic recovery plan, it will have to be a multilateral format. I think that despite the fact that multilateralism has been challenged in the context of this pandemic, as states tend to close and borders become ever more relevant, I think that we remain committed to the fact that multilateralism will be the only way out, given the nature of migration and given how these issues progress. I will stop here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grigauri, for your wonderful views, and especially thanks for your views about the vulnerable situation of the feeble migrants. And I think it should be addressed in the different forums, including the highest global forum. So now I would like to request Mr. Nazrul, the Director General, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to share his views, especially the government response to the crisis. Mr. Nazrul.
Thank you and good afternoon. This is my first encounter with this distinguished institution, and because only encounter or engagement I had previously was my only brother used to study here. Now you have our mentor, Mr. Shahidul Haq, with you. So I think our interaction will be strengthened in the future. So a lot of things actually came to my mind while I was listening to the excellent presentations and discussions, especially during the presentation of Mr. Shahidul Haq and also our friend Georgie, that who discussed mainly migration and remittances. And both of them were brilliant, definitely. So, but from the government, we may also think that we also take this stand that migrants, which they, our Foreign Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, and also Georgie pointed out to that migrants are not ATM machines, definitely. So we should not only go to them for remittance, because they are bringing a lot of other things. Two most important foreign incomes that we have, the garments export and remittances. These two are actually driving our missions back at home. So $40-odd billion that we are getting from garments export, and around 18.42 billion that we got last year from remittances are the mainstay of our foreign exchange. So this is one part. So when this COVID crisis struck us, immediately the government understood the gravity of the situation. So from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government, what we did, we wrote extensive letter with specific instructions to our missions. The heads of our mission, virtually many heads of our mission virtually went from door to door to help the migrants who were in distress. Also, our government allotted limited amount of money so that those migrants who cannot come out during this lockdown, they can be provided with basic daily items, amenities, and some food so that they can survive, because most of their works or the shops or wherever they are working were closed. So the government tried to help them, keeping them there. Then the pressure of repatriation actually started mounting on us. But you will definitely agree and definitely recognize that the government of Bangladesh may have done better than many established migrant sending countries. So far, our repatriation from those countries in distress are not that much high compared to other big neighbors. So what we did, we also wrote, not only that we wrote letters and we hold, or we held, and we usually hold regular video conferences with our heads of mission, and our foreign minister, foreign secretary, state minister, they sit with them for a long time, listen to them, and they give specific instruction. And whenever there is a problem, immediately that is done. That is solved by the foreign minister, our state minister and foreign secretary, and we take necessary steps so that these problems can be overcome. Then what we did, our foreign minister wrote to Secretary General. He also wrote to UNCTAD Secretary General. He also wrote to 3 presidents of European Union, so that our migrants in different countries can be safeguarded, their interest can be ensured, and also they can have access to basic health and other facilities. We also internationally, we also joined the call of action on remittances in crisis by Switzerland and UK. And probably you have heard that we have formed, or we have actually organized a group of friends at UN in New York. And we have 103 sponsoring countries, and we had written a policy letter to the United Nations Secretary General, so that our migrants and their rights can be ensured during this crisis. And also what we are trying to do, since we understand that not only for COVID crisis, also for sudden drop of prices of oil, and also the Saudization, or the recent policies of the Gulf countries that they want to mostly employ their own citizens in many of their sectors. All this will result into return of a lot of our migrants. And also we know that in future, we will have new avenues opening up due to 4IR technologies, probably new jobs will be coming. So we have thought of 2 things. We may have to repatriate them, but we are now going for reskilling. So with IOM and other development partners, what we are trying to do, we are coming up with reskilling strategies so that most of the migrants who come back, they can be reskilled, especially up to 45 years. And if we cannot reskill them, those who are older or even don't want to go back, what we can do, or how we can actually utilize their experience and expertise locally, that we are trying to do. So we are trying to come up with a database. And you know, our Honorable Prime Minister, whenever she gets any chance, she raises this issue. They raises the issue of migrants and the remittance. And even yesterday, there was the global summit of ILO. And though it was the summit of ILO, mainly on future of works, but Honorable Prime Minister spent more than 60% of her intervention on our migrants and their rights. So that's what we are trying to see. And globally also, we are trying to reactivate the regional consultative processes like Colombo process and Abu Dhabi dialogue. And right now, when I'm discussing this, we are having a virtual meeting with our neighbors in the region and also distant neighbors or distant other countries, migrant sending countries. What might be our reaction collectively to this pandemic? So Bangladesh is active, and you have also heard from our distinguished Foreign Secretary Sir Shahidul Haq sir that we have led the migration field for quite a long time under his guidance and with the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister. So we also think that we are trying, he mentioned GCM, Global Compact on Migration. We are also taking necessary steps so that we can implement the GCM provisions in Bangladesh. And we are also trying to encourage other countries, those who are parties to the GCM, they should also implement those provisions in their countries so that our migrants' rights and other benefits can be ensured. And Shahidul Haq sir,
I'm sorry, Mr. Nazrul.
Yes.
I mean, time is up. If you can finish in 1 minute.
Yes, Shahidul Haq sir and Georgie also mentioned that to come out of this problem, we need the global initiative. So we also think that it is very difficult for Bangladesh or any other country, migrant country, to do something individually. So we are also trying to do something collectively at regional and global front. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nazrul, for sharing your views. Now, of course, I believe that you have taken a lot of measures, but still some concrete policy recommendations came out in the discussion, and I believe that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the concerned department will consider those recommendations. So now actually I'm going to start the question and answer session. We don't have actually much time. I have already received some questions. First, I would like to request Mr. Rahit of Pratham Aalo and then Ms. Sherin of IOM to raise your question. Mr. Rahit, are you there? Okay, I think he's not there. And then Ms. Sherin of IOM.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor. And thank you to the organizers and the eminent presenters. It was indeed a very interesting discussion. During the discussions, we have heard the whole aspect and issue of migration. So I'd like some perspective on the issue of migration and linkages to development, as well as the whole impact of COVID-19. So while we're looking at the challenges of COVID-19 and drawing out the interventions, as have been mentioned by the IOM chief, through the strategic plan for returnees post-COVID-19, the interventions focus on immediate, medium, and long-term aspects. Now, migration, especially for a country like Bangladesh, will continue to be an integral part of development because we are a country of origin. Now, how can we ensure that given the current situation, particularly in this whole pandemic, including the health stigma, the status of migrants, that migration continues to be perceived as a contributor to development from the perspective of the countries of destination? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ambassador Shahid, please, if you kindly respond to this question. Ambassador Shahid, can you hear me?
I think let's, if I may propose, let us take a couple of questions and lump it together. How about that? Given the time constraints.
Well, then...
I see a lot of questions raised in the chat box also, so someone can also...
Then I have actually another question to Ahsan Mansoor.
Dr. Joshim, Ambassador Shahid is speaking.
Yeah, I can hear it. So then actually, just 1 minute. Well, I think Ambassador Shahid, would you please respond to this question? By this time, I will, address another question.
Okay. Sherin has a very very relevant question, and the whole issue of health continues to play a critical role. In fact, health has been a part of the migration debate now about for 20 years. I think one of those time in 2008 or 9 that WHO came out with a resolution stating as to that migrant health is equally important. And we have seen during this particular pandemic crisis how it became critical. You know, especially if you look at Singapore, Singapore's initial response to the COVID left out migrants, and then they realized that if everybody is not safe, none is safe. So they went back into the second phase where they included the large migrant community that's in Singapore into a comprehensive response plan. And you know, very interestingly, Singapore then reported to the Human Rights Council in a written format as to what they have undertaken in terms of looking at migration and health during the COVID period. So that's a very critical aspect. In fact, some of the issues that are being discussed here were discussed for 2 long years in the UN floor in 2017 and 18 in the compact, which also our chief of mission of IUM mentioned and I mentioned. I think that can be currently be the focus. And as DG Nazrul has rightly pointed out that Bangladesh has adopted and taken forward. Now somebody has to hold the fort and create the platform for discussions and remind the states. You know, states often needs to get reminded that this is what you committed to and need to follow up. Singapore was very responsive in terms of that. I'm sure the other countries are equally trying to address. Thank you.
Okay, you have another question from Mr. Aziz. Could you suggest for planning a Bangladesh qualification framework which can best suit for integration among the education with the job market occupation? Briefly, please.
I think this is a very relevant question. We know that the investment of people Bangladeshis make on migration, the return is very low because of their skill. If you compare us even with Sri Lanka, I'm not going to other areas, the return is much higher. So I think that's one area. The government has over the years made some contributions in terms of enhancing skill for eventual job abroad. But it's also a long process, and it's not a ad hoc arrangement or a segregated arrangement. It has to be put, as Dr. Nazdin has rightly pointed out, education and skill. Not that everybody has to do PhD or masters. You know, there are other skills which could equally have the potential to get a return. So that's the part of it, and I fully agree with the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hawk. Actually, we need to finish the program by 1, and after this session, our Honorable Vice Chancellor will provide the concluding remarks. So I have a question for Mr. Ahsan Mansoor from Dr. Ishrat Jakia Sultana, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science. She raised a question. Although you said you don't want to be optimistic regarding how today's old situation of poverty may be reversed, you mentioned in your conclusion that it is reversible. So, number 1, could you please briefly identify 3 key areas the country should focus on to do this? And B, what makes you confident? Yeah. And the second one is, what makes you confident about the use of technology to minimize corruption to ensure ease distribution among the right people in the right way? Professor Mansoor. Dr. Mansoor, are you there?
Okay, thank you. The 3 areas that I would like to highlight is that first is the containment of the infection. I would say, I can reasonably say that we have failed in containing the infection level, and that's not helping the recovery path. It's not the trade-off issue is not between livelihood and disease control. I think that's the wrong way of describing the situation. We could have easily done the controlling of the disease like East Asia has done, like China has done, like Europeans have done. But we have followed somewhat like Trumpian approach that open it up and disease will take care of itself. Disease is not going to be taken care of itself. It has to be taken care of by us in a collective way or through scientific interventions like vaccine and things. So we are in the middle of that situation. So first thing is that if you want to really activate, create employment and reduce poverty, we have to create the environment for it. You cannot leave the elephant in the room and expect the furniture will be intact. No, furniture will not be intact. Our elephant is still in the room and we have to drive it out of the room. That's one point. Secondly, I would again say that we have proposed to the government that please allocate a budget for about 24,000 crore to provide for 6 months income support for about 1.5 million families, those who have lost their jobs. And the third one is the stimulus package that the government has announced. Implementation of that will also be key in creating employment and thereby reduction of the poverty that has been suddenly increased in recent months. So these are the three pillars that we strongly recommend again to the government that they have to do on those 3 fronts. Work is going on, but not to the full extent that we would hope for. As on this, could you repeat the second question, please? Dr. Jashim, could you repeat this?
Okay. The second query actually she raised, what makes you confident about the use of technology to minimize corruption?
Oh, yes. Okay. We have seen that as the government call it, the talika that comes from the field level for the recipient or the beneficiaries is full of wrong names, full of fictitious names, fictitious national ID numbers. So essentially, we have to channel those funds to certain ways and having 20 or 200 same telephone numbers so that money can go to the same accounts and so on. So we don't want that. There are successful models whereby people can identify themselves. You can check on that. How much is their telephone bill per month? Are they buying telephone SIM refill in 10 taka each, or they're buying it 500 taka each or 100 taka each? That will tell you whether they are not having enough income. Look at their pattern of talking, how much they're talking, talk time. That will give you an indication of their level of income. So there are many ways you can determine some of those social behavior to capture their things. At the same time, they have to identify that I was working in that factory or in that store, and this is the mobile number of my employer. And you can verify that also directly or indirectly, physically and otherwise. So there are many ways that you can directly identify the individual. He will give his bKash number or his rocket number, and the money can be given to him. And he will also identify himself by national ID number. So you have lots of checks and balances. Every national ID number and every bKash number has KYC. That means government and bKash or the rocket has enough information about that individual, his profession, where he lives, where he works, etc., etc. So these are all available information that can be used and processed intelligently to make the transfers.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Actually, we are running out of time. So we have some other questions raised from the audience, but unfortunately, we cannot take the questions. So I think Mr. Rahit is there from Pratham Alo. Mr. Rahit.
Yes, I'm there. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Would you please just
are you listening to me?
Your question? Yeah, I'm listening. Just briefly raise your question.
Okay. Okay, I have precisely two questions one in regards to migration and remittance, and another on the impact of mental health. In his deliberation, Mr. Hawk mentioned about the brutal picture of host countries where now they feel in regards to GCC. I precisely mentioned on the GCC countries. They now consider that these migrant workers being diseases and let them away from our country. So, and last week we just witnessed that a parliamentary body of Kuwait mentioned that they have restructured the size of migrant workers in regards to their population. So on that particular notion, I precisely wanted to know from Mr. Shahidullah, what should we do, as we see that in Saudi Arabia, they are planning to reduce the migrant workers by 2030. Kuwait is going to following the same thing happens to Oman. So I think the COVID scenario may also create a challenge as well as an opportunity to restructure our job market for the migrants. So are we on the right track, and what should be our response to tackle in the post-COVID scenario that is on migration? In regards to mental health, as Mr. Hilal mentioned, that is one of the key area that will haunt us in the post-COVID scenario. So what should be the intervention? Country like Bangladesh, as we suffer or tackle the scenario of COVID, when we see that the lack of our public health. So how could we address the issue of mental health in the post-COVID scenario? Thank you.
Okay, I would like to request to, Mr. Shahidul Haq and Dr. Halal to respond very briefly, because our Vice Chancellor has another event to join. So I'll be glad if you just respond very briefly.
Okay, can I ask Dr. Halal to come first? Because I have already spoken a lot.
Dr. Halal, are you there?
Okay.
Okay,
please
I'm
go ahead.
responding
Please go ahead.
session for a class. I have a class at 1 o'clock. So I am leaving. To be very frank, I see mental health
I'm sorry for the inconvenience, actually, for the internet disruption. We can't hear him properly. I think Ambassador Shahid, if you kindly respond to his.
I will just three sentence. You know, this whole Middle Eastern saga should be addressed, and I'm sure our ministries are doing it at three levels. One is that the country level. You go to the individual countries and try and negotiate, because we have bilateral agreements for labor migration with almost all the GCC countries. So that's one platform. The second one is the regional. Currently, you know, the Global Forum on Migration Development Chairmanship is in the Middle East. The UAE is current chair. So that's a platform where you go and raise your voice. And that's a platform where civil society and international organizations all are given floor. So this is the time to make the voice. And third is the global level, and both in the compact, because all the GCC countries have adopted, unfortunately, the compact. So within the compact, they have taken an obligation, although it's not binding, but that's a morally binding instrument. So these three instruments should be simultaneously used. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I would like to request Professor Atiqul Islam, Vice Chancellor, North South University, to provide his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Joshim. First of all, let me thank Center for Peace Studies for organizing this series of seminars or webinars on the impact of COVID on various aspects of life. For today's function, let me particularly thank Dr. Hassan Mansour, Ambassador Shahidul Haq, and Dr. Hilal Mohyuddin for presenting in-depth analysis of the problems, as well as suggesting some ways of how to overcome those in their papers. And let me also thank the three commentators for their incisive kind of comments. Let me also thank the questioners for asking very pertinent questions. My feeling about this kind of seminars is that please do not try to cover too much of territory. Of these three issues, each one of them could be worth spending a day on. We'll have in-depth discussion, and based on that, we could inform policymaking. Because we've covered 3 different issues in a very compressed sort of time, we couldn't do justice to the presenters, to the commentators, to other people who attended this. I also apologize to Georgie, whatever his surname is, I never got it, for us pronouncing his name a bit differently. It's not a very pleasant thing for the person whose name we are saying in a different way, pronouncing in a different way. My feeling is that these are very important issues, extremely important issues. Poverty and inequality was always important. But what I have seen from the outbreak of this COVID-19 thing to date, it is going to be aggravated. The situation is going to deteriorate, particularly when you think about the informal sector, as was mentioned by one of the commentators. You know, those people who used to sell things on the footpath, the hawkers, people like that, you know, they will be pushed from somewhat a comfortable position to extreme poverty. And what can be done about those? You know, if we look at the migration and remittances, it's extremely important to look into the immediate impact on migration of this COVID thing. Are we going to get back lots of people from the Middle East, and as lots of them are going to come back? What's going to happen to our people that work in Italy, Singapore, Malaysia, etc., etc.? And what is a good way of minimizing the damage? So these are policy issues. Again, the other thing is, you know, the COVID-19, the generational divide. The generational divide, even without the COVID-19, is a very complex and intricate problem to work on. You know, having raised 3 kids in a Western country, I understand what they go through at their teenage and, you know, from puberty to in their early 20s. And particularly now when you have a situation where the kid doesn't go to school, parents don't go to office, you know, you just put all these people, they are not in their respective areas, and suddenly they find themselves confined in a small space with children, with everyone. Everyone is on everyone's face. This is a very difficult situation. I got comments last semester from some parents saying that, thank you so much for keeping my children busy by taking online classes. They could at least see, interact with their you know, sort of peers virtually, and they could talk with their lecturer, and they stayed busy with this thing. Now, in lots of cases, lots of universities, other educational institutions, this has not been happening. So that is another fascinating area, and we need to work on those. You know, there's some talk about issues coming forward now between the 2 generations, facing each other, issues such as homosexuality. There are other issues like that. We basically should try to minimize again the adverse impact of this on our children, and we can only hope that we come out of this situation quickly enough before permanent damage is done to the psyches of some of these people. I'm not going to say anything except that North-South University is an engaged university. North-South University believes in applied research. I occasionally say that it might be of some interest to find out how many angels can dance on the tip of a pin, but that is not of much practical consequence. We would rather solve everyday problems, problems that will have an impact on the end user, problems that if you solve can ease people's lives a bit. So we're into that sort of research. In other words, we are more into applied research, and we are more into engagement with various parties. We are for that kind of research which will inform policy making. which will make input to policy making by the government, by the industry, by the professions. And this is a good example of research that have tremendous potential to inform policy. With that, let me thank all the participants, the presenters, the commentators, and everyone else organizing it, and and whoever participated. Let me thank profusely on behalf of North-South University, and we hope to hold this kind of conference in the future. My only suggestion would be, please do not spread it so thinly. Let's take time and give each one in-depth time for discussion, for analysis, for people to ask questions, and let us work it out thoroughly. Let me put it that way. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Professor Atikul Islam, for your remarkable speech, and thank you for your suggestions. Really, we got a lot of response, comments, questions, but as you rightly pointed out, maybe in future when we organize a webinar or virtual conference, we'll try to focus on one or two specific themes so that we can make justice to the commentators, speakers, presenters. Thanks again for your very enlightening short speech. So just briefly, a few words. We're very close to finish the event. So to overcome the crisis of poverty and inequality, as suggested by Dr. Hassan, the government and the relevant departments needs to review the fiscal year policy and safety net programs, and to ensure that vulnerable people who are the ultra poor or new poor, they actually get whatever the government's financial or food aid is going on. And Ambassador Hawk already mentioned about the migration issues, the remittance issue, especially his idea of a new migration order, and Bangladesh can take a lead role in this case to ensure the human rights of the migrant workers, including the female workers. And we also need to address the generational divide that is addressed by Professor Helal Mohiuddin, and it's very important. And in this, let me have the privilege to tell you that, as our Vice Chancellor mentioned, that North-South University, like any quality university in the Western world, developed world, ensure the online facilities for the students to engage them, so that even if they go to developed countries, Western world for higher studies, they are used to with all these online activities. And we always try to focus. CPS will continue its efforts. We are always encouraged by our Vice Chancellor to focus on more and more on research. So thank you very much, everyone, for your active participation and contribution. And we hope and believe that you will be with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.